Hi, my name is Chasser Johnson, and I'm the co-founder of the Stock Gossip app. Today I'm going to answer some of your questions. These questions were gathered by Malika Nicole. You can follow her on Twitter at Malika Nicole, and you can follow me on Twitter at Chasser Charles.
All right, I am getting through these questions. The next one is, what is the purpose of a hedge fund? Okay, so to understand a hedge fund, I'll go by the definition of what I saw. There's formal definitions, look them up on your own, but I'll kind of go by what I saw. A hedge fund is open to something called accredited investors, typically, to go into investments that aren't typical to normal investors in the stock market. It's generally what a hedge fund is, give or take. It's professionally managed by investment advisors. I used to run a crypto hedge fund. I was the portfolio manager. I wasn't actually the full manager. That's a different person. And those are two very different people. The portfolio manager is very focused on the management of the portfolio of the hedge fund, while the general partner or manager will take care of the clients as well and operations. And there's more to it than just the portfolio, to say the least. Actually, the portfolio, I would almost argue, is only a small portion of the whole part of a hedge fund organization, but that's neither here nor there. So a hedge fund allows accredited investors, I don't know the exact numbers, but I think they need $2 million in assets or like $400,000 in income annually to qualify as an accredited investor. They can go into these funds, and they can get into these very alternative investments. Crypto is an alternative investment. That is not something that you can just go into a hedge fund and do. It's a reason why it's hard to get into a crypto ETF. It took a while for those to happen because those are alternative investments that at one point in time it really was kind of just a hedge fund company that could invest in cryptocurrencies for other people. Obviously, you can do crypto on your own, but to be professionally managed, you can't just go to an investment advisor and say, "Hey, I want to just have a crypto portfolio manage it for me." They would have to wash their hands of it. One note about the whole accredited investor thing: this is an old law. It kind of comes from the 1930s during the Depression, when a lot of people lost their money in the stock market. And the idea was that people that have already made money, they should only be the ones that do these really risky investments so we can protect the normal investor. And again, another pitch for Stock Gossip. I don't mean to do this, it just happens to be this way. But I hope that changes over time. I hope we can really change that law. I think anyone should be able to invest in a hedge fund. I think the accredited investor thing is complete and utter BS, and that Stock Gossip's mission is to really get people to learn about investing and wealth generation. We think anyone can do it. I know anyone can do it. I've met a lot of people on Wall Street. They're not the smartest in the world, I promise you that. But they may have the connections and the lack of fear to actually try these investments, and that's why they do really well. Sometimes having the lack of fear is a good thing to do these investments and do well in them, but also the patience to read and understand what's going on. You got to have that patience to understand. But I'm going off topic now. So hedge funds, accredited investors, that's who it is. I hope that changes someday. Accredited investors, the whole reason for that law, it was to protect small-time investors from these really excessive investments, but the truth is, hopefully that changes someday. So that aside, a hedge fund will go into not just cryptos, but maybe a small business that hasn't had an IPO yet. I've been a part of multiple corporations that didn't IPO yet. They didn't have an initial public offering, and so they were owned by a hedge fund. And the hedge fund was actually quite aggressive. They weren't an active investor in which they were getting into the day and day of the business, but they were very, very much interested in making sure the CEO and all the officers of that company understood that they were there to make money and they better do it. And that's something that I think retail investors should really feel like that. I don't care how big XYZ company is. If you own that company, you should be aggressive. You are the hedge fund owning that company. You are the final boss of the company. You can hire and fire the CEO. You can tell, you should make it. If you have a grievance, you should make it loud and clear that CEO is doing horrible, because that is your money. They are generating your wealth. That is the point. And the hedge funds did it well. The hedge funds were always looking at the numbers. This is kind of where the MBA comes in. I will fully admit it. But the number, the most basic numbers are going to be very obvious. Is revenue going up? Are your costs too high? Do you actually have a market in the future that you have goals towards? That's the main part of it. And these hedge funds, they'd go into the details, but the reason why they'd go into the details was to make freaking sure that the revenue and the costs were where they needed to be at. And they would ask questions to make sure that those two top things were going to be happening. And as a retail investor, you can do the same thing. So hedge funds, they go into alternative investments like crypto. They might do options and derivatives for other people. That's the key thing there. You as a retail investor can do options and derivatives, but to get someone else to do it for you, it may be, there may be some more regulation involved. Investment advisors don't really like doing that for retail investors. But hedge funds will do it for accredited investors. They'll do hedges with options. They can do crypto. I was part of a crypto hedge fund. Or you can just buy and sell small businesses, or hedge funds may take public companies, buy the whole thing, and then make it private. And doing so, they can have more control over it, so they could, in their minds, get it back on the right direction, and then possibly do another IPO with it once it's on the right direction and the machine is back to being a money machine. A company is nothing more than a money machine. It's supposed to be spitting out money for its investors, and I want you to be that investor. So that's basically what a hedge fund is. It's not clear cut what it is, but it's basically for rich people to invest in these off investments that aren't possibly the stock market, or it could just be the stock market. It doesn't really matter. It's just whatever the hedge fund manager thinks is the most lucrative for those investors. Sidebar on all this. I believe Bernie Madoff, he's the guy who did the Ponzi scheme that then screwed over a bunch of people for money and then went to jail, and I think he might have left us in jail, to say the least. But anyways, that was a hedge fund, and that went horribly bad. So being, not all hedge funds are created equal. The good ones, they're working. They're the ones that they're really working. They are paying attention to things. The ones that make you a lot of money in the hedge fund world, you don't hear much about. They're grinding things out. They're getting the small and mid-sized companies to where they need to be at to be the large companies. They actually do important things. The bad ones are the ones that people see that they just they screw other investors over, or they just make bad decisions. They're betting. The good hedge funds, they're not making bets. They're making pretty sure decisions here that will grow businesses and actually make jobs. It's actually a good thing too. But again, not all hedge funds are created equal. I hope that was helpful. I meandered again. I apologize. If you have any other questions about hedge funds or being a hedge fund portfolio manager, I'd be happy to answer them as best I can. Thank you for watching.